At high noon, the town of Redstone burned under a cruel sun. Heat pressed down like a heavy hand. Red dust filled the air. A crowd packed tight around the old barnyard, shouting and laughing as if they had come to a fair. At the center stood a tall wooden beam, and from it hung a giant Apache woman. Her body swayed slowly. Her bare feet scraped the air. Dark bruises circled her neck, raw and angry. Still, her eyes did not beg. They burned with defiance, sharp and unbroken. The crowd screamed for her death. They called her a monster. A deputy grinned as he held the rope, enjoying every second like it was a show put on just for him. No one spoke for mercy. No one looked away. Then a worn wagon rolled into the square and stopped. A lone rancher sat at the reins. His coat was dusty and patched. His face was lined by years of wind and sun. He had only come to town for salt, nails, and coffee. But the sight before him froze his hands on the reins. He saw the woman's size, her strength, and the calm fire in her eyes. He saw a living soul being crushed while the town cheered. He knew the choice before him. If he rode away, the night would pass like all others, quiet and empty. If he stepped in, he would make an enemy of the whole town. The woman lifted her head and met his gaze. She did not plead. She challenged him. The rancher moved in one swift motion. He drew his knife and cut the rope. It snapped clean. The crowd fell silent. The giant woman crashed to the ground, coughing hard as air tore back into her lungs. Dust rose around her knees as she gasped and fought for breath. Shouts erupted. Men reached for guns. Rocks flew. Deputy Morrison shoved through the crowd with a pistol in hand, his face twisted with rage. He shouted that the rancher had broken the law and shamed the town. The rancher answered without raising his voice. He lifted his rifle and fired a single shot into the sky. The crack split the square. Horses reared. The crowd stumbled back. No one dared fire. Morrison spat threats, promising to return with the whole town by nightfall. The rancher said nothing. He lifted the wounded woman into his wagon. She stood with effort, refusing help, blood marking the dust beneath her feet. The wagon rolled out as curses followed behind. Outside town, the wind turned cold. The woman sat tall beside him, silent, eyes forward. The rancher did not ask her name. He did not offer comfort. Some things needed no words. His cabin appeared at the foot of a long hill, small and weathered, standing alone against the wide prairie. He helped her down. She brushed his hand away and walked on her own, wounded but proud. That night, firelight filled the cabin. Wind howled outside like wolves. The rancher sat by the door with his rifle across his lap. The woman sat near the hearth, the flames reflecting in her eyes. Neither slept. Both understood the danger had followed them home. Morning came pale and cold. The rancher worked the fence line, replacing posts torn loose by the wind. Without a word, the woman joined him. She lifted heavy logs as if they weighed nothing. All day they worked side by side in silence. Hammer, wire, post, and sweat spoke for them. Inside the cabin, she ate quietly and took the floor instead of the bed. That night again, she did not sleep. The days passed the same way. She fixed what broke. She stood watch without being asked. She did not thank him. She did not explain herself. One evening, as the wind rose and dust darkened the sky, the rancher locked the cabin tight. Inside, firelight danced across the woman's scarred neck. For the first time, she spoke. She asked why he had saved her. The rancher answered simply, because no one else did. Her eyes hardened. She told him the truth. It was her own people who had hung her. She had refused a forced marriage. Her strength had made them fear her. The town had only finished what her tribe began. The rancher listened, his grip tightening on the rifle. Outside, hoofprints appeared in the wet earth, half hidden by wind and dust. Someone had been watching. Inside the cabin, their eyes met in silence. Both knew the rope had only been the beginning. More men would come. More blood would follow. And when the wind finally fell quiet, the waiting began. The night did not pass in peace. Long before dawn, the rancher felt it in his bones. The land was too quiet, like a held breath. He sat by the window, rifle resting across his knees, eyes fixed on the dark line where the prairie met the sky. The Apache woman stood near the door, tall and still, listening to sounds he could not hear. Then the wind shifted, and with it came the smell of smoke. A single torch flared in the distance, then another. Soon more lights appeared, moving slow and steady across the plain like hunting beasts closing in. Hooves thudded against the hard ground. Voices carried on the night air, rough and angry. The rancher rose. He checked the rifle and whispered for her to stay low. She did not answer. Her eyes were already burning. A voice cut through the darkness. Deputy Morrison, loud, confident, drunk on numbers and hate. He called the woman a monster and promised fire if the door stayed shut. 8 men surrounded the cabin, torches raised high, shadows dancing wild against the wooden walls. The rancher spoke once, calm and cold. He said anyone who crossed the fence would not live to see morning. The first shot shattered the night. Wood splintered near the window. The rancher dragged the woman down as another bullet tore through the wall. Fear did not touch her face. Instead, a low growl rose from her chest. She grabbed the heavy chopping axe leaning by the hearth. With one violent push, she burst through the side door. Firelight exploded across the yard. Her axe swept wide, knocking a torch from a man's hand. Flames licked his coat as he screamed. Panic spread fast. The rancher followed, firing twice. 2 men fell into the dust, groaning and still. Morrison shouted orders, backing his horse away. Someone hurled a can of oil against the cabin wall. Fire bloomed bright and hungry. The rancher rushed to beat it down with a blanket, sweat pouring from his face. The woman stood between him and the attackers, axe rising and falling like thunder. In the chaos, she did not look human. She looked like something older, something born of stone and storm. By dawn, the men fled. Smoke curled from blackened boards. Blood stained the ground. Morrison vanished with a final threat carried away on the wind. Inside the cabin, the rancher collapsed against the wall. His chest burned. The woman set the axe down and stood guard until the sun rose fully over the plains. Later that morning, dust stirred on the horizon again. This time, it was not chaos. It was order. 30 riders appeared, dark horses moving as one. They formed a wide half-circle around the cabin, silent and watchful. At their front rode an elder chief. His hair was streaked with gray. His face was carved by years of loss and command. He raised a staff and spoke in a voice that carried weight. He called the woman his warrior and asked why she still lived. She stepped forward, alone, towering against the riders. Her neck still bore the marks of the rope. Her voice was hoarse but steady. She said she lived because she refused to bow. Not to a noose. Not to men who thought they owned her. Murmurs rippled through the riders. Some lowered their eyes. Others tightened their grips on spears. The chief spoke again. He named her shame. He named her defiance. He told her to choose, return and face judgment, or die where she stood. The rancher tightened his hold on the rifle, ready to end it all in blood. She stopped him with a single hand. She chose to stay. Not for land, not for the cabin, but because here, she was seen as a person. Silence spread wide and heavy. The chief studied her for a long moment. Then he lowered his staff and turned his horse away. One by one, the riders followed, leaving the land quiet and bare again. The rancher breathed out slowly, like a man waking from a nightmare. The woman stood beside him, her strength unshaken, her choice made. The days that followed were different. Repair replaced waiting. Ashes were swept away. Fences were raised again. When the rancher worked, she worked with him. When he rested, she watched the horizon. No one from town came near. Stories traveled faster than horses. They spoke of fire, of gunshots, of a giant woman who would not fall. One night, as the fire burned low, the rancher opened a small wooden box. Inside lay a string of old beads, worn smooth by time. He placed them on the table without a word. Her hands trembled as she touched them. They were a final message from her past, left behind by the chief when he turned away. She said if she stayed, it would be her choice. The rancher nodded. He did not argue. He did not claim her. He only shared the fire. Outside, the prairie stretched, endless and quiet. Inside, two shadows merged on the cabin wall. No longer strangers, but not yet something else. The world beyond had not finished testing them. It was only waiting. Spring came slowly to the prairie. Winter loosened its grip inch by inch. Ice broke along the creek. Green pushed through the dirt like quiet proof that life always finds a way back. The rancher stood on the porch one morning, watching the light spread across the land. For the first time in years, the silence did not feel empty. The Apache woman stepped out beside him. Her neck still carried faint scars from the rope, but her back was straight and her eyes were clear. Together, they carried new fence posts into the field. He dug the holes. She set the posts. Their work moved in rhythm, steady and sure, like they had always known how to stand together. Word traveled across the plains. Riders passed at a distance, slowing to stare, then riding on. No one challenged them. No one came close. The ranchers. Name became a warning, spoken low in towns and camps. The man who cut the rope. The man who stood his ground. One evening, as the sun dropped low and painted the sky red and gold, the rancher sat inside the cabin with a small cradle pulled near the fire. The beads lay inside it, glowing softly in the firelight. He touched. Then gently, then stepped back. The woman stood quietly. She looked at the beads for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was calm but heavy with meaning. She said the rope had been used to end her life. The beads were hers to choose. She placed the necklace into the cradle with care, like setting down a promise. Then she rested her hand on the rancher's, not to ask, not to claim, only to share the moment. From that night on, the cabin felt different. Still small, still rough, but no longer lonely. Meals were simple. Days were long. Nights were quiet. They did not speak much, but when they did, the words mattered. The summer heat returned, but the land held strong. Crops grew. Fences stood firm. The rancher laughed once, surprised by the sound. The woman smiled at that, just slightly. Like a crack in stone, letting light through. Months passed. One afternoon, thunder rolled far off in the hills. The woman stood at the edge of the field, watching the clouds gather. She said storms used to frighten her when she was young. Not because of the rain, but because storms reminded her how small people can feel. The rancher listened. He told her storms had taught him the same lesson, but also something else. That standing through them matters. When the rain finally came, they stood together on the porch, letting the cool drops wash the dust from the land. The prairie breathed again. Years later, travelers would speak of that ranch. They would say a woman of great strength lived there. They would say a man once cut a rope and changed his fate. Some called it legend, some called it foolishness. But none denied the truth. The woman never returned to her tribe. The tribe never returned to claim her. Her choice stood firm, rooted like the posts she had set with her own hands. The rancher grew older. His hair turned white, his hands stiffened with time. But he never again sat alone by the fire. On quiet evenings, they watched the sunset together. Two lives shaped by loss, joined by choice. Not rescuer and rescued. Not master and servant. Only equals in the Wild West, bullets often decide endings. But sometimes a single cut at the right moment frees more than one soul. And on that wide, open land where wind never stops moving and the horizon never ends, a lone rancher and a towering Apache woman proved that freedom begins when someone dares to stand.